Interested in a jetpack? Barely a scratch on it. It'll look great with that battle armor. It's same color even.
I'll take that off your hands.
How much you offering?
Your life.
2024 has turned out to be a great year for fans of the Star Wars Expanded Universe, colloquially now referred to more often as Legends. The trend has continued and even delivered to us a remaster of an old classic from over 20 years ago. If you haven't played the game in question, stick around because this video will be spoiler-free. The conversation and interest in what the universe had to offer before the establishment of the new canon feels like it's never been higher, with more creators talking about it than I've ever seen before, a plethora of old Legends novels receiving reprints with brilliant new artwork, and of course a host of old Legends video games being ported to modern consoles, with some even seeing total remasters. Games like The Phantom Menace, The Clone Wars, and more have been ported to hardware like the PS5 and Nintendo Switch. Star Wars Dark Forces saw a gorgeous comprehensive remaster bring the game to modern audiences in the highest fidelity we've ever seen it, and in a way that makes it easy to access for new and old fans alike. And now another Star Wars diamond in the rough has been resurrected to bring a new generation of Star Wars fans through the gutters of scum and villainy in a way that few products from the brand have ever managed to deliver. Star Wars Bounty Hunter has made a beautiful return to the public consciousness thanks to the recent remaster from Aspyr, a developer that's no stranger to Star Wars content but certainly bears a complicated past with the galaxy far, far away. Now before I get into all of that, I need to talk a little bit about why this game is actually kind of important to me personally. If you're not interested in hearing me yap about that, then please click the timestamp in the description to skip to the review at any time, because this is about to be a bit of a yap fest spiel, and it's not related to the remaster at all, so seriously, if that's what you're here for, click the link and it'll take you straight to the review.
Well, we won't be seeing him again.
Okay, so Bounty Hunter was not only one of the first retrospectives I ever put out, but it was also the first Star Wars video I ever made for the channel. Since Star Wars has become such an important facet for my channel now, I can't emphasize how important that fact is, because it was in making that retrospective that I felt my love for the brand be reignited. Before I made that video on Bounty Hunter, I had kind of stepped away from the universe for several years, distanced myself from it. I really wasn't a fan of the sequel trilogy, and I've made it no secret that I haven't liked a lot of how Disney has handled the universe since their acquisition. After they acquired Star Wars, they announced that none of the books I'd read, games I'd played, and lore I'd learned would matter for any new Star Wars products going forward. Then they released a slew of products that didn't really appeal to me and criticized me and anyone else who didn't like their new products as hateful people or adolescent crybabies when we tried to voice that we didn't like what they were doing with the brand. And after a few more years of watching what I perceived to be increasingly more vindictive additions to the Star Wars universe be released, and then having the same mantra repeated to me over and over again that, quote, no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans, end quote, every time I voiced my dislike of this new direction, I just accepted that and said, fine, I guess I hate Star Wars then. This was my stance for a solid couple of years. Then, when I eventually decided I wanted to play an old Star Wars game for the channel, I chose Bounty Hunter. The more I played that game, the more excited I was about the universe, and the more thrilled I was to remember that, actually, I really love Star Wars. I always did. This recognition triggered a negative reaction in me when I was writing the script for my retrospective on that game. I had such a good time reading and talking about all of the different worlds, backstory, and lore for that game, but as my joy of realizing how much I loved Star Wars after all returned, it brought with it a bitterness about the direction Disney had taken the series. I spent a good portion of that video taking shots at Disney, making fun of them, and just in general attacking everything they've done with the Star Wars name in a pretty vindictive way. At the time, I thought these were funny. I meant them to be jokes that would make viewers chuckle and laugh, but I
may have gone too far in a few places.
While a lot of viewers did voice that they liked my strong stances in the video, I think that bitterness clouded what it was I really wanted to say. To date, it's my most disliked video on the channel, and I still get comments even now from viewers vocalizing their frustration with my attitude in that video. Comments from both people who like and dislike Disney saying they were just hoping for a fun retrospective filled with adoration of the EU rather than a 59-minute tirade of anger at Disney woven into a Bounty Hunter video. My initial reaction was to ignore them, stick to my guns, and consider those who didn't agree with me as tourists who didn't appreciate the old brand like I did. Like they didn't get it the way I do. As time passed, however, I've seen the hypocrisy of that, because it was the Disney Star Wars representatives treating me that way for years that made me so bitter in the first place. In the video sense, I've tried to soften up a bit and make my videos more about how passionate and exciting the expanded universe was, rather than about how I may feel about whatever Disney is doing now. To be more welcoming of Disney fans to what I think is not only great, but better than what they're familiar with, and hopefully even make them a bit more accepting of Legends fans in the process. I've come to realize that Disney separating the expanded universe from their new canon was actually the best thing that could have happened. Because the EU hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there to be loved, experienced, and enjoyed just like it always was. Only now, it's completed. There's hundreds of books and comics, dozens of games, and mountains of lore to learn and enjoy, and now it's all for a story that is, in essence, complete. If you love Disney's take on Star Wars, then awesome. You're getting tons of content, and you've got tons more coming. If you don't like what Disney is doing, then breathe a sigh of relief, because thanks to their initial decision to separate our canonicities, nothing they do matters or affects the Star Wars we loved. Theirs is like its own thing. You just have to let go of everything you fear to lose. So when I saw that a Bounty Hunter Remaster was being released, I knew this was my chance to talk about it. I want to talk about the Star Wars that I love, and even though I see that same line thrown around that no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans, I know now that it's just not true, and by looking at the comments on my retrospectives for Jedi Academy, Jedi Outcast, Jedi Knight, Shadows of the Empire, or pretty much any of the Star Wars videos I've done, I think I've already proved that Star Wars fans love Star Wars. So, with that lengthy dramatic rant out of the way, let's finally talk about Star Wars Bounty Hunters 2024 revival to modern consoles. Quick disclaimer, I did receive an early review code for this, and although the opinions I'm giving are my own, in the interest of transparency, I wanted to disclose that. Now, as I said earlier, Aspyr is no stranger to Star Wars games, and many of you may have heard about their legendary fumbling of the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. That one got them into some serious hot water with fans. Not only were their servers woefully underprepared for the volume of players who wanted to play online, which resulted in most people not even being able to find a match, much less run it without latency issues, but they also failed to compress the games, resulting in enormous file sizes that are, quite frankly, unacceptable for games that old. In addition to that, they were caught including mods into the core game without crediting the original modders for their work, which is pretty much criminal, and also a myriad of other smaller issues that plagued the collection. It'd be bad enough if that was the only hiccup, but unfortunately, Aspyr managed to let down fans even before that with their port of Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords for the Nintendo Switch. When they announced they'd be porting KOTOR 2 to the Switch, they marketed that the ever-famous restored content mod that essentially completes the unfinished game would be launched as DLC for the Switch release. This promise was likely pivotal in a number of people's decision to purchase the game in the first place, and as you can probably guess, they announced later that they were going back on that promise and would not be delivering the mod as DLC, and then did not offer a refund to purchasers, but instead allowed the consumer to visit their website, submit their proof of purchase for the Switch game, and then receive a download key for one of a small selection of other available Star Wars games. Unsurprisingly, people were not pleased about literally any of this. So when I saw the remaster announcement for Bounty Hunter, my excitement was quickly tapered by the sight of the word Aspyr on the screen. It's not all bad, however. Aspyr was lauded for their work on the Tomb Raider 1-3 remasters and have released a handful of other competent, even praised titles in the past. So I was going into this with a cautious optimism. All they needed to do was polish a few issues, touch up the visuals, and make sure the port was optimized with a reasonable degree of customizability, and I'd be happy to shill the thing. Anything more than that, like the Boba Fett outfit, would just be extra for me. The first thing to note is that the menu has been totally reworked and it looks stunning. It's faithful to the idea behind the original release's menu, but updated graphically and looking cleaner than ever. Sometimes remasters will update the menu with lazy replacements, but this is like the same menu but at its full potential. Getting into the first level, I think we could see right away how good this game looks. This footage is from before the official release, so no day one patches or anything, and I had absolutely zero performance issues. Now, granted, I have a pretty solid rig running this, so I can't attest to how easy it will run on other platforms, but for me, it was smooth as butter. I was getting a solid frame rate my whole playthrough. Everything ran without a hitch. It's great. I'm hoping severely that is indicative of what everyone else will experience when they run this game. As for the size, Bounty Hunter Remastered is a bit bigger than I was expecting, but I think it's reasonable, with the whole folder taking up just over 10 gigabytes, 3 of which are from the upscaled cutscenes, so not bad. I'm pointing that out due to Aspyr's issues with the gargantuan size of the Battlefront Classic collection. As for the gameplay, it's all close to the same as it was with the original release, but with a few quality of life improvements that end up making a massive difference for the game's overall enjoyment. Previously, players had to sort through all of their items to find the one they wanted to use at any given moment. It wasn't unplayable, but it was certainly unintuitive, and tended to discourage me from playing with the flamethrower, saber darts, and other weapons as much, just because I didn't want to sift through my items mid-combat to find them. Well, now, players can pull up a far more intuitive weapon select screen to pick out what item they're wanting to use that pauses combat and allows for a smoother gameplay experience. Also, doing this is optional, of course. If you're the kind of player who prefers not to slow the combat and wants to just sift through the items the classic way, then you can still totally do that, and sometimes I did. But I actually really liked this feature, and I'm very glad it was included. It made some of the more tense situations later in the game feel a little fairer, in my opinion. The game is still mad difficult though, so don't be worried this is going to affect how punishing your experience will be. I promise, once you get to Tatooine, it's still just as awful. Speaking of which, you know, my first Bounty Hunter video was where this counter started. Fun to see it all come full circle. I'm not stopping it though. Tatooine is overused and I'm standing by it, and after revisiting this game, this might still be the worst Tatooine level of any I've played since the first time I covered it. Another feature that's been improved is the actual bounty hunting itself. In the original game, each level was littered with a number of bounties for players to find, mark, and collect. Some are wanted dead, some alive, and some are either or. Each of these bounties has a unique name and lore write-up as to why they're wanted, which is super cool for lore nerds like me to read through. Unfortunately, in the original game, doing this could often be frustrating or even downright impossible at times, because having to swap to your visor, go into first-person mode, scan the room, select your target, and then go collect them, all while being shot at and attacked, made it basically impossible to read a lot of these lore write-ups. Not to mention that there were so many of these bounties that I'm pretty sure players would often start just ignoring them just to survive encounters. Which is why one tiny simple change completely rectifies all of those issues. Going into visor mode slows down time. That one addition literally makes all the difference, and I'm always so much more likely to scan a room and look around for bounties now because it just feels more conducive to do so. Also, the visor is bound to a dedicated button press now, which makes getting into visor mode an all-around much smoother process than before. It's just really nice that hunting bounties in a game called Bounty Hunter is fun now. And that's really just about all of the major changes made to the game. Other than that, this is very much the same video game from back in 2002, just with a lot of the rust scraped off. That said, I did encounter a handful of issues during my playthrough that I hope will be addressed in the first patch. Things like audio issues where in certain parts of the level it would have a kind of glitchy resonance in the background, or a visual issue like a cutscene showing various character models just straight up T-posing in the background. Probably the most egregious issue that absolutely needs to be fixed is that holding down the manual aim button and firing would frequently flicker in and out of aiming for some reason. I think this was an issue with the original game too, so it's not like Aspyr caused it or anything. I have no idea why this was happening, but I figured out that there was an easy workaround where I would just start firing first and then hold the aim button, and that normally fixed it, but it felt like an unintuitive way to use manual aiming. Other than that, the game ran as expected, and I'm happy to say even better than its original iteration. Yeah, thankfully, at least as far as my experience goes with the game, I think I'd call this remaster the optimal way to play Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I clarify my experience because I can't attest to how it's performing on consoles or other people's rigs, but my time with it was phenomenal. Mostly anyway. Aside from the few glitches I pointed out, all of which are likely to be patched out, the game ran better than expected. I didn't notice anything particularly out of place in my playthrough, and the game has quite literally never looked better. I mean, we can even turn off the motion blur, which of course is a must, despite it being maxed out by default for some reason. just turn it off. Trust me, there's very few reasons motion blur should even be on, much less maxed out. One massive improvement over the original is the inclusion of something that 100% should have already been in the original game, but somehow wasn't. I think I even mentioned it in my retrospective of the game over a year ago. Yeah, I'm talking about the unlockable Boba Fett costume. As a reward for completing the game, players will be able to go back through the story mode dressed as the notorious son/unaltered clone of Jango, known for his brutal and merciless methods, even being told directly by Darth Vader himself not to disintegrate his own bounty.
Like a panther. Yes?
Well, he was brutal in the EU, for a while at least, anyway. I was really excited to show this cool new costume off, but after playing through the first 5 of the game's 6 available chapters, I turned the game off, walked away from my PC briefly, and when I came back, it had restarted. Turns out, I was due for some Windows updates, and I walked in just in time to see it updating. When I came back and fired up the game about an hour later to finish that last chapter, I was shocked to find all of my progress was gone, and even my graphical settings were reset. I have not been so utterly screwed by a Microsoft update in my entire life. I can't describe to you how devastating it was to power through 5 of the 6 chapters in basically one day and lose all of my progress that fast. So you want to know what I did? I sat down and played through the whole game again right there in 4 hours so I could get that Boba Fett skin and show it off here for you now. And after beating the game basically twice in less than 3 days, while also writing pretty much all of this script, I can tell you this about the iconic armor set reward. I mean, it's pretty cool, I guess. Getting to play as Boba is neat, and this is the closest thing to Star Wars 1313 we'll probably ever get, so there's that. It's a well-made skin that looks cool, although not quite as cool as Jango's shiny armor variant. I'm glad it's here, but I struggle to imagine anyone beating this game and then itching to go back through it again just to play in Boba's armor. That said, I shouldn't have to say this, but we are at a point in the industry where I feel the need to give some praise to Aspyr for exercising enough restraint to just include this as an unlockable instead of a microtransaction DLC or pre-order bonus or some other greedy nonsense. Aside from a few glitches, I have to say there's not much to criticize here. At least not from the angle that it's just trying to polish and port the original game. There is something really important I need to cover about Star Wars Bounty Hunter Remastered though, and that's the fact that this one matters more than something like the Dark Forces Remaster or the Battlefront Collection. Because unlike those titles, this game was locked to consoles. Sure, you could emulate it or run it on the modern console ports, but whereas Battlefront and Dark Forces already had PC ports out there with fan community supporting them via mods and whatnot to keep them alive and fun, Bounty Hunter had nothing. At the very least, the existence of this PC port means the fan community can sink their teeth into the game to preserve it, mod it, and make it thrive, even if it's only in a small bubble. It also means the game can not only live on in higher fidelity, but thanks to its new Steam availability, just became accessible to millions of Star Wars fans who may not have otherwise given it a second glance. A few Steam sales from now, and the amount of people more familiar with the story of Jango Fett leading up to his appearance in Attack of the Clones will likely have doubled, and I love that. Which leads into our final question. Should you buy it? Well, it's a pretty hard game, and although the new QOL improvements do help make it feel a bit easier, it's still challenging, particularly during the last few chapters. I just think you should know that going in if you haven't played it before. It's not a particularly easy game. That said, I personally think it's a ton of fun, but I also really like action platformer games. So if you're a fan of Star Wars, action platformers, or both, then I can pretty much guarantee you'll find something to enjoy here. Even if it's just the little references to other EU properties, like a bounty being placed on someone by Kappa the Hutt, a character who only shows up one time ever when Mara Jade confronts him in Mysteries of the Sith, which is not a game I was expecting to see referenced, but I was super thrilled when I caught it. Some people may not be sold on the $20 price tag, considering this game is over 20 years old, and maybe you think it should have been $10 instead. That's a hard one, because I really do want to see more titles like this get soft remastered and ported to the PC. I actually prefer this to remakes even, since optimally the game remains pretty much the same but with better optimization. For companies to keep doing this though, they need to see more than a little profit, and I don't think a $10 price tag would cut it. I wouldn't blame anyone for not wanting to drop $20 on a 20-year-old single-player game that they'll beat in 8 to 10 hours, especially given that you're not really getting any new content beyond a skin and the minor mechanical additions I talked about earlier. I think you'll be able to tell really quickly just by looking at the footage whether or not this is something you should buy. What you see is pretty much what you get, and it does have a really fun story that meshes really well into the EU while leading into Attack of the Clones. If it's optimization you're worried about, then I'm happy to report that I didn't see anything egregious enough to justify suggesting you should avoid it. I'm actually half expecting the little things I pointed out to be gone after the first patch comes out. So regardless of if you've played the game before, or if you're a stranger to this Mandalorian adventure, I think Bounty Hunter is absolutely the kind of game we think of when talking about hidden gems. And thanks to this remaster, this is as good a time as ever for you to put on the Beskar and start hunting bounties. It's not perfect, but it's fun, functional, and looks better than ever. So I'm really relieved to say that Aspyr's Star Wars Bounty Hunter Remaster is honestly pretty good, and I can't wait to see more people get into it and learn all about another one of the unique legends from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I've been so excited about doing this video. I've even been thinking about it on and off since the remaster was first announced. It was a blast getting to play through these missions again, and a genuine treat to see it running smoother and looking better than ever. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd ask that you consider dropping me a like and subscribing if you haven't already. I do a lot of old video game content, plenty of which is Star Wars related, so I'm sure you'll find something you like. Members of the channel get access to live stream replays, members-only posts, special emotes, and oftentimes early access to certain videos. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, that's all I've got for you.